There's a sentence that stops a room. I don't think God's going to forgive me for this. Most people hear it and reach for reassurance. Of course, God will forgive you. And theologically, they're right, but they're answering the wrong question. Because that sentence, as honest as it sounds, is rarely about God at all. When we think about forgiveness, we think about it the way we've lived it: conditional, earned, weighed. We've all withheld it ourselves. So when we picture standing before God with the worst thing we've ever done, we project, we hang our own limits on something that doesn't have any. God's forgiveness isn't a switch. It doesn't turn on and off depending on what you bring to the table. The current's always on. It always was. The question was never whether it's available. So when someone says, "I don't think God's going to forgive me," I hear something different underneath. I don't think I'm going to forgive myself. And that's a much harder sentence to say out loud. Because if you've already decided what you did is unforgivable, then asking starts to feel like a performance. You're going through the motions of something you don't believe is open to you. Most people misread the signal. They call it guilt. A lot of the time, it's heavier than that. Guilt can move. It carries you toward honesty, toward reckoning, toward repair. It's a signal with a direction. What they're carrying instead is density, the kind that doesn't point anywhere. It just closes the field down around you. Guilt says, "I did something that added distortion." Density says, "I am the distortion." And you can't ask forgiveness for what you think you are, so you stop asking. That refusal to forgive yourself feels like humility. It isn't. When you decide your guilt carries more authority than God's mercy, you've built a private courtroom inside yourself, overruled grace, and called it righteousness. That's not humility. That's a broken circuit. The current's still on, the mercy's still moving, but the self has set its own verdict between itself and God and mistaken that blockage for God's absence. Self-forgiveness isn't the self declaring itself innocent. It's the self stepping out of the way and letting mercy through. Real contrition isn't the price of admission. It's what happens when you stop bracing against the weight of what you did. It opens you. And your self-forgiveness doesn't wait on theirs. Someone else's forgiveness of you is their work. It belongs to them. They may get there, they may not. That isn't yours to control. But it can't be the condition for your own healing. Make their forgiveness the price of yours, and you've handed the key to someone who may never give it back. Self-forgiveness is an internal reckoning. It doesn't need a witness. It doesn't need permission. It needs honesty with yourself, about yourself. That's all, and that's enough. Mercy was already moving before you ever asked. The framework that came before Jesus, at least the way we've always lived inside it, ran on merit, debt and payment, sacrifice and standing. Your position before God was earned, maintained, and lost by what you did. I'm not making a flat claim about ancient law. I'm telling you how the human imagination has always run the equation. You do wrong, you pay, you perform, you earn. It's the only framework we reach for on our own. What Jesus did wasn't add forgiveness to that system as a more generous option. He replaced the system. He didn't come to help you settle your debt. He came to dismantle the debt framework entirely. The cross wasn't a transaction. It was an architectural shift. Forgiveness stopped being the exception granted to the people who qualified. It became the ground everyone stands on, the starting point, not the reward at the end. That's why the current's always on. Not because God's lenient, because Jesus made forgiveness the structure itself. Which means the person who says, "I don't think God's going to forgive me," isn't making a statement about God. They're making a statement about who they've let sit as judge. Still inside the old framework, still measuring what they did against what they deserve. And by that measure, they're right. By that measure, none of us make it. But that's not the framework anymore. God's forgiveness was never the variable. It's always been at full capacity. The only question is whether you'll stop overruling it. Guilt can be a signal, so can grief, so can regret. None of them were ever meant to be the court bench. Self-forgiveness isn't letting yourself off the hook. It's taking yourself off the throne and handing final judgment back to the only one it ever belonged to. That sentence, "I don't think God's going to forgive me," isn't a theological conclusion. It's a map. It shows you exactly where you've set up court. And if you're the one saying it, the invitation isn't to try harder to believe God will come through. It's to step down off the bench of self-indictment. So the question is then, are you ready to step down as judge and into self-forgiveness?